This is a time for a rising. However 2020 may have knocked you down, you know that 2021, or you hope that 2021 is the time to get back on your feet. But it's not just going to happen with the turning of a page in a calendar. For there to be a rising to our lives, there's going to have to be a rising within our lives. And we're taking several lessons on what that means and how to do it from the life of a man named Joseph, who was faced with rising up time and again from just gut-wrenching setbacks. And he did rise up time and time again, which is why his life holds some of the most important lessons that we could be going to school on right now for our own life in this season of our life. Last week, we looked at the importance of having a vision and holding on to it for our life. Today, we're going to look at something that I doubt would intuitively make anyone's top 10 list for rising up. If I were to say, okay, we've entered 2021, there's a light at the end of the tunnel, what kinds of things do we need to do to really pull ourselves out of 2020 and really make the most of 21 and getting back on our feet? I don't think what we're going to let Joseph teach us today would be on that list. At least I don't think I would have put it on the list, even though it's at the heart of most of our self-inflicted wounds, or when we don't practice it, it leads to self-inflicted wounds and keeps us from rising up from them. And when we don't have this, it also doesn't protect us from things that aren't self-inflicted. This really is a big one. So if you want to rise up and stay up today's lesson, it's going to be critical. So let's jump in. If you weren't with us last week when we kicked this off, Joseph is one of the most intriguing figures in the Bible. In fact, so important is his story that it takes up more real estate in the opening book of Genesis than any other single individual, more than Adam or Eve or Noah or Abraham or Isaac or Jacob. That alone should stand out. Christians believe that the Bible was inspired by God, that he moved in the life and mind of the writers in such a way that we have exactly what he wanted us to have. So it really is God's word to us and for us. So with so much ink committed to the life of Joseph, it's obviously something that God wanted us to study carefully, to know about his life and get the principles there. Well, last week, we learned that Joseph was the favored son of his father, Jacob, which made his brothers jealous and filled them with hate. So much so that one day they staged his death by ripping his clothes, and his robe specifically, and dipping it into goat's blood. And then they sold him into slavery to a caravan group that was heading toward Egypt. And then they took Joseph's torn and blood-stained robe back to their father, saying they found it on their way home and he must have been killed by some type of ferocious animal. So what happened next? Let's find out. This is again from the book of Genesis. When Joseph was taken to Egypt by the Ishmaelite traders, he was purchased by Potiphar, an Egyptian officer. Potiphar was the captain of the guard for Pharaoh, the king of Egypt. The Lord was with Joseph, so he succeeded in everything he did as he served in the home of his Egyptian master. Potiphar noticed this and realized that the Lord was with Joseph, giving him success in everything he did. This pleased Potiphar, so he soon made Joseph his personal attendant. He put him in charge of his entire household and everything he owned. From the day Joseph was put in charge of his master's household and property, the Lord began to bless Potiphar's household for Joseph's sake. All his household affairs ran smoothly, and his crops and his livestock flourished. So Potiphar gave Joseph complete administrative responsibility over everything he owned. With Joseph there, he didn't worry about a thing except what kind of food to eat. Okay, let's stop there. There's some important background here to understand. First, Joseph was sold into slavery, and his destination turned out to be Egypt. At that time, Egypt was the most powerful socio-political force on the planet. Egypt ruled the known world. Second, he was sold to a man by the name of Potiphar, who was an official of Pharaoh himself. Pharaoh was one of a line of rulers who were considered to be like gods. Their word, their rule was absolute. So no one else had their power and their control. And Potiphar was not just any official, he was captain of the guard. So even though a slave, this was a great place for Joseph to land. And land he did, and began to succeed. Now, what was key, though, to his rise through the ranks as a slave, to where he became head of everything that Potiphar owned. Yes, God was with him, but why was God with him? What was it about Joseph that God so clearly honored? What was it that caught Potiphar's attention and had him elevate him above all others? Well, let's go back to what we just read and pull it out. He soon made Joseph his personal attendant. He put him in charge of his entire household and everything he owned. Potiphar gave Joseph complete administrative responsibility over everything he owned. With Joseph there, he didn't worry about a thing. So you see what it was? Potiphar trusted Joseph. He could be trusted with leadership. He could be trusted with possessions. He could be trusted with processes and methods and values. Why? Because Joseph was a man of integrity. And that's the key trait I want to focus in on, integrity. It's been said that integrity, if you want a quick one-line definition, it's who you are when no one is looking. That was the trait that got Joseph noticed. It's also the one that got Joseph tested. Let's keep reading. Joseph was a very handsome and well-built young man, and Potiphar's wife soon began to look at him lustfully. "Come and sleep with me," she demanded. Okay, you thought reading the Bible was boring. Let's stop there, though, a minute. This would be a tough situation for any man, but particularly Joseph, because you can bet that Potiphar's wife was not hard on the eyes. Potiphar would have had his pick of women for a wife because of his rank and wealth, and so she was probably one of the more beautiful and appealing women in all of Egypt. And Joseph was young. He couldn't have been much past his early 20s by this time. Your hormones bubbling at a peak with every indication that he had never even been with a woman before. And she comes to him directly, seductively, saying, "Sleep with me, sleep with me." Now, you may have never been in a situation exactly like that, but I'll bet you've been in one similar, a situation where you came face to face with the opportunity to do something that you know you shouldn't do. Everything in you was drawn, though, to doing it. And what made it even more seductive, if you will, is that no one would see you. No one would know. You get the chance to steal some money. And because of the situation, no one's going to know. The chance to watch some porn. The chance to cheat on a test. The chance to lie on an application. The chance to do anything but work when you're supposed to be working from home. Most of the time, we don't steal. We don't go to the seedy side of the web. We're honest. We tell the truth. We work diligently at our jobs. But we've all had situations when we have the chance, the opportunity to do something that we know we shouldn't, and we know nobody will know. Nobody will see, which turns up the volume on the temptation to about as high as it can get. So what did Joseph do? Well, let's keep reading. But Joseph refused. "Look," he told her, "my master trusts me with everything in his entire household. No one here has more authority than I do. He has held back nothing from me except you, because you are his wife. How could I do such a wicked thing? It would be a great sin against God." She kept putting pressure on Joseph day after day, but he refused to sleep with her, and he kept out of her way as much as possible. One day, however, no one else was around. When he went in to do his work, she came and grabbed him by his cloak, demanding, "Come on, sleep with me." Joseph tore himself away, but he left his cloak in her hand as he ran from the house. Friends, I'll be honest with you, I remember reading that for the first time back in my 20s. And whispering a prayer to God, "Please don't ever let me face that kind of temptation." I mean, wow, this is just hardcore. And he passed the test. He made the choice to be a man of integrity. And what adds voltage to that is that it wasn't a public choice, which is easier to make. This was a private one, the kind that's the hardest of all. And he didn't just make it once, but over and over again. Did you catch that? She threw herself at him day after day, probably dressing as seductively as she could and saying things like, I'll never tell, and no one will know, and don't you find me attractive, and sleep with me. Let's go back to our definition of integrity. It's who you are when no one is looking. Who you are when situations like this come your way. And it is a choice. And it's not a matter of willpower, but choice. Willpower is akin to discipline. It's exercising personal self-restraint or personal habits. Integrity isn't something you enforce onto your life as much as it's something that you cultivate within your life. It's not something you do, it's more who you are. Not eating another piece of cheesecake because you're trying to lose weight is a matter of willpower. If you are supposed to be working 40 hours at home and you actually work 40 hours, even though you could get away with 30 or 35, see, that's integrity. That's integrity. So if integrity is a choice, if it's something from within you, if it's who you are, how is it cultivated? I mean, how is Joseph able to be this kind of man? How can who you are when no one is looking be answered a person of integrity? Well, it's simple. And it's by understanding there's never a time when no one is looking. There's never a time when no one is looking. There's always someone looking. Did you catch what Joseph said to Potiphar's wife? What came immediately to his mind? Yes, that it would be a betrayal of the trust her husband had put in him, but he said something else, something that was out front and center for him more than anything else. Let me read it again. He said, how could I do such a wicked thing? It would be a great sin against God. Authentic integrity, the kind that God blesses and truly arrests the world's attention, isn't driven simply by an internal code of ethics, by a deep and abiding sense of right and wrong, being a 1 on the Enneagram. No, it's having a deep sense of transcendent accountability, that you really are never alone, that there's always someone watching, that there is a God, and your entire life is being played out before that audience of one. Joseph faced an off-the-charts sexual temptation. It would be private, discreet, pleasure-filled. No one would be looking. Joseph's response, how could I do such a wicked thing and sin against God? In other words, there is someone looking. He knew that someone who would be looking, that person would be God. Who talks this way anymore? Who believes this way anymore, acts this way anymore? When was the last time you said those words to yourself about something that no one would see, no one would know? When you said, how can I do this before God? How can I do this while God is watching? A true moment of authentic integrity that was fueled by nothing more and nothing less than knowing you are living your life in full view before a holy God. True integrity is who you are when no one is looking, because it's forged on the understanding that someone actually is in each and every one of those private moments. Well, what happened next? Joseph got another promotion, right? The success just kept coming. His integrity was instantly rewarded. This is one of the things that I love about the Bible. I mean, it just keeps it real. Here's what actually happened. When she saw that she was holding his cloak and he had fled, she called out to her servants. Soon all the men came running. Look, she said, my husband has brought this Hebrew slave here to make fools of us. He came into my room to rape me, but I screamed. When he heard me scream, he ran outside and got away, but he left his cloak behind with me. She kept the cloak with her until her husband came home, and then she told him her story. That Hebrew slave you've brought into our house tried to come in and fool around with me, she said. But when I screamed, he ran outside, leaving his cloak with me. Potiphar was furious when he heard his wife's story about how Joseph had treated her. So he took Joseph and threw him into prison where the king's prisoners were held, and there he remained. Now, before you think that what happened to Joseph undermines the entire case that I've been making for integrity mattering and helping you rise up and its integral role in protecting you from adversity and such, think again. because there are some very interesting things to notice about what we just read. The Bible tells us that Potiphar was burning with anger. It doesn't say against who. It was probably against his wife. Don't forget who this was. Potiphar was captain of the guard. The guard was an elite group of warriors who guarded the Pharaoh and did his bidding. They were also the hit squad, almost like the undercover covert group. Some historians have termed the captain of the guard as the chief of the executioners. So he was no one to be trifled with. He was a man with immense power and authority and influence. He could sign anyone's death warrant with a snap of his fingers. He could and did kill at will. That was his job, killing who Pharaoh wanted, killing whoever he wanted. Here was a slave, and he was told this slave dared sexually assault his wife. And all he did was put him in prison? That doesn't pass a sniff test. Now, there's something else going on here. Pharaoh was angry, but he was angry at his wife. Angry that she was probably, he suspected, habitually unfaithful. Angry that she was forcing him to do away with his most favored servant, a man that he knew to be trustworthy simply because of the public nature of her accusation. I mean, he had to do something, but he did the least possible. Joseph wasn't killed. Joseph wasn't exiled. Joseph wasn't put into slave labor. He was simply put into prison. And did you notice? Not just any prison. He went to the king's prison, the one for white-collar crimes, the Club Med, the cushiony kind of place where doing time is more like being in rehab, where he would be fed, sheltered, cared for, even under Potiphar's watchful eye, and ultimately able to be released. So you got to read between the lines here, but not by very much. Potiphar knew the kind of man Joseph was, and apparently the kind of woman his wife was, but he was in a tough position. He couldn't discount his wife's accusation without publicly humiliating her and himself in the process. But the action he takes against Joseph, in light of it, can still, allow him to retain the family's honor. So Joseph's integrity saved him again. It made Potiphar believe Joseph and protect him as much as possible against a false accusation, even one made by his wife. But even though it served Joseph in the short term, that's not why you choose a life of integrity. You do it for the long-term returns. You know, the kind of rising up and staying, continually rising up over the course of a lifetime. Investing in integrity is like investing in the stock market. I remember reading a column by Bill Barnhart, who for years was a business writer and editor for the Chicago Tribune. And he once talked about the difference between investors and traders in the stock market. It always stuck with me. He said that a trader is making decisions on a minute-by-minute basis. They're wheeling and they're dealing, they're pursuing short-term profits. They may have no confidence or interest whatsoever in the companies in which they buy stock. All they're after is an immediate payoff. Investors, on the other hand, buy stock based on their views of the company. They're in it for the long haul. I mean, they're kind of chaining themselves to that mast. They commit their money to a stock, believing that over time, the stock will pay dividends and will grow in value. The ups and downs of the market don't scare them because they believe in the quality of the company and its leaders and its product. When it comes to your spiritual life, you have to decide whether you're going to be an investor or a trader. And which one you choose will determine everything. Everything. You're putting your investment into integrity, into the audience of one, and you're chaining yourself to that mast, trusting, being confident in what it will do for you over and over and over again. No matter what setbacks you face, no matter what you have to rise from, integrity will always be the way to pull yourself up again and to have others help you up.